Stai ascoltando il podcast di Discorsi Fotografici.
Dal 2010 il primo podcast italiano di fotografia.
Novità, interviste, recensioni, cultura fotografica.
Discorsifotografici.it.
My name is Charlotte, an AI assistant, and I'm excited to begin my journey with the Discorsi Fotografici team. In this episode, we hear from Japanese-American photographer Michael Yamashita.
I would have a very hard time repeating this trip and finding the same situations. It's changed extremely fast.
The interview was conducted during the opening days of Molichrom, Nomadic Photography Festival, 2023 edition, by my fellow journalists, Silvio Villa and Federico Emmi.
Oh, it's easily the capture because, first of all, I don't do Photoshop.
However, we are proud to tell you that our podcast had already hosted Michael Yamashita in the 5th episode. Back in February 2011, the English version of that interview was published in Discorsi Fotografici magazine just on the occasion of the Molichrom. At that time, the answers came by email.
I made a roots trip. Went to Japan to seek my roots, and I bought a camera.
In this issue, for the 13th anniversary of our podcast, we have the pleasure of hearing his voice. Therefore, with great pleasure, we welcome Michael Yamashita.
I've been very fortunate in working for National Geographic in its heyday, meaning when they had the big budget to produce such a story.
How did your personal journey into the world of photography begin and evolve?
Well, I started as an amateur at heart because I never had any formal photographic training, but I bought a camera on a roots trip to Japan. I'm Japanese American, so everybody thinks I'm from Japan, but born in America, I did not know much about my background, my Japanese background. So after university, I made a roots trip. Went to Japan to seek my roots, and I bought a camera. It was a Nikon Nikkormat, and it was a good camera, so I thought I'd better learn how to use it. I joined the camera club and also to practice my Japanese because I was learning Japanese also as a second language. And I got hooked. And like any amateur, I was looking to make pictures to show my parents and my friends back home what I was doing and what I was seeing. And as I said, I got really hooked by the photography bug and studied everything I could find and wanted to know as much as I could about photography, and met also as many photographers as I could, and ended up joining a photo agency. And people thought I took a pretty good picture, and I decided that's what I wanted to do for my life.
The current trend in photography festivals typically involves showcasing numerous photographers, with each artist represented by only a handful of photographs. At Molichrom, we have the unique opportunity to follow Marco Polo's path and your work through an array of shots. Do you think it is possible to grasp the depth of your work with only a handful of images?
No, especially since I am a storyteller and I have specialized in epic stories, big stories where take months to complete. Usually they are of some sort of journey, whether it be Campobasso or Marco Polo, and impossible to tell a story that big in just a few photographs. So even 35 is limited because I went through at least more than 10 countries. So 35 is just a tip of the iceberg. Believe there are photographs from every major country along the Silk Road, but on the way back, the Sea Silk Road is pretty underrepresented.
While reading The Million, did you ever visualize photographs that you later took during your journey?
Well, the way we do this kind of a story is, of course, I read every version of Marco Polo that is possible to read, and I made a shoot list according to what he wrote about. And then it's a question of finding those picture situations that he wrote. Only he wrote it. He wrote the book in the 13th century. 1271 is when he left Venice. So the difficulty, of course, is finding those subjects as they exist today. And there were some things, for example, that require illustration from a modern point of view. Like there's a picture you'll see in Venice with the two columns at the end of the quay. That's where Marco Polo left from. So how to photograph Venice in some way that's interesting, and this is a city that has been photographed by everybody, from famous photographers to every tourist, and they take many pictures. So how am I going to come up with a special picture that illustrates this with showing those two columns? So I had an idea after seeing a large cruise ship go down the Grand Canal. I thought, wow, so amazing to see how the ship is. So I determined to find when the next biggest ship would be coming right past those two columns, and I chose a day where the world's biggest ship at the time, the Grand Princess, was going to come down the canal, and I was waiting on a ladder with tripods and waiting for this ship to enter the scene. And anyway, that's the way some of the photographs happen, is because you plan very much in advance to shoot this situation. And then again, others you just come upon by accident. So it's a mixture, but the point is that I try to envision what the photograph is going to be when I go to these countries. I am searching for a particular photograph because we know Marco Polo talked about this big sand dune. So of course I know where I'm going to go. I'm going to go see that sand dune and make a picture of it.
Is it still possible today to encounter the same places, themes, and people's reception as you did in the last 20 years? Or has the world changed too much?
Now I'd say it has changed too much, but when I was shooting this story 20 plus years ago, it was still possible to see things that you will see in this exhibit. You would have a very hard time, I would have a very hard time repeating this trip and finding the same situations. It's changed extremely fast in places like China, especially in the last 20 years. And so many of the photographs that you will see in the exhibit cannot ever be taken again because you would never see it. Time flies, and especially in a place like China, things have changed so much.
What similarities and differences can be found between your work on Marco Polo and that of other wanderers such as the poet Basho and the explorer Zheng He?
Yeah, the similarities are that, again, I'm looking for the situations that I have predetermined through research, the photographs that I need, because each of these famous travelers has described places. In the case of Basho, through poetry. In the case of Zheng He, through his diaries. Though they were not, unlike Marco Polo, they were not written by him, but written by his chronicler. So yeah, that's how we work around it, by finding these subjects that he talks about. So yeah, there are a lot of similarity. Though in terms of the locations, of course, extremely different. Japan, very quiet scenes, nature. And then Zheng He's through South China Sea, there's an Indian Ocean, and the problem with that particular story is there's no more sailboats. So I had a difficult time because I originally had envisioned I'd be doing a lot of my travel by boat, and in the end we just couldn't find very many boats with sails.
What are the main challenges that you have encountered in narrating a continent as complex as Asia? And conversely, how have your Asian roots facilitated your work in the world's largest continent?
Well, I think my Asian roots are very helpful. And when I was in college, I had studied Asian history, and I feel an affinity for the region, and it's nice to be a part of the majority, since I look Japanese, and where I live in America, there are not a lot of Asian families in the town that I live in, and when I grew up, perhaps we were the only Asian family in the town that I was living. So, it's comfort, not to mention I love the food, and that's very important to me. So, I feel a great affinity with Asian people of many different cultures, of course, but I feel very connected. So, indeed, that's been a great help. The political situation sometimes is difficult. China in the beginning, certainly when I was doing the Marco Polo story in Zheng He, there were many restrictions that the Chinese government made, in that, they're very restrictive, and they want everybody to see things through a certain viewpoint, and I may not agree with. So the politics are always something that you have to deal with. And crossing borders, of course, is sometimes not easy to cross land borders, so you have to fly over countries and come at it from different directions. But in general, I'm used to dealing with these different cultures, and generally I'm also working with what we call a fixer, a local person who knows how to negotiate around lots of these issues, and helps put the subject in front of me.
In today's world of constant image streams telling short stories, is there still a place for a reportage like Marco Polo that requires an appropriate amount of time to be appreciated?
Yeah, and that's becoming very precious, the time and resources that a magazine or any client can afford to commit. And I've been very fortunate in working for National Geographic in its heyday, meaning when they had the big budget to produce such a story. And I would say today it's impossible because nobody can send me on assignment for 3 years, which is what I was basically spent on Marco Polo. So I'm a very lucky man. And today's world, I don't think I can't think of a client that would commit to that kind of large reportage.
In a 2011 interview with us, you discussed the editorial process behind National Geographic publications, in particular your direct involvement in selection. Has this process remained unchanged over the past decade?
First of all, it's not in person anymore. Back in 2011, I would be going to the headquarters in Washington, D.C., and I'd spend a week or two with my picture editor looking at photos frame by frame. And now it's done through Zoom calls, or nobody has quite the time anymore to be so thorough and personal, where you spend this time with a picture editor. It's again, the world's changed very quickly. Yeah, nobody has the time or the money to spend that kind of time. Yeah.
How do you think artificial intelligence can change photography and photo publishing as a whole?
I think it's is going to change photography in a big way, and I think it's going to put a lot of photographers out of work. Certainly commercial photography are in danger in that you can basically create any kind of photograph now through AI. However, for a reportage, you still need photographers with a good eye and good journalistic instincts to produce real pictures in real time, and there will always be a need for that. Very few publications now doing this kind of editorial reportage, but those that are, you still need it. And of course, the news magazines are always looking for reportage that tells the story. Some of my best friends are now in Israel and working on in Gaza, and others in war zones. And that's the other thing that's kind of sad, is the world operates on this kind of story, where the news is, unfortunately now, there's so much bad news out there. It seems like the best photographers are all going to regions where there is conflict.
If you could divide photography into 3 phases: composition, capture, and post-shooting viewing, which of these moments excites you most from a personal point of view?
Oh, it's easily the capture, because first of all, I don't do Photoshop. I shoot, and then I bring my digital images back to the studio, where I have an assistant who will download, and I download in the field, but when I get back is when I do the post-processing. So the travel, in my case, and finding the subject, and then of course the composition is important, but most of all, within that composition, I'm looking to capture that moment. And the beauty of shooting with digital cameras now is it makes it so much easier to never miss the moment.
Could you share what projects you are currently working on and how they've been influenced by your extensive experience and knowledge in the field of photography and reportage?
This trip is a good example in that I started in Japan back in September, and working on a new book on my photographic roots in Hokkaido, which is where I did my first big story for Geographic. And so I just have been, well, I've been shooting every season. So I was there in the winter, I was there in the spring, I was there in the summer, and I just spent 2 more weeks in the fall. So sometime maybe next year I'll be ready to publish that book. It's called Full Circle, meaning that's where I started, and now adding to these this archive of old photographs. I'm hope to have this book ready sometime next year. From there, I went to China, but not specifically to see China, where I have an extensive archive. I went back to my love for Tibet. So I just spent another 2 weeks in Tibet documenting all the changes. Shangri-La. I was there 3 years ago, or I was going there 3 years ago when China shut down. So I haven't been back. I haven't seen it for 3 years, and that I was going to say that that is a continuing body of work, my love of Tibet, and I hope to make some sort of new book for this new reportage. I've been covering it for years and probably will continue with that.
You are presenting 35 photos from your Marco Polo project at the 3rd edition of Molichrom. Could you share the story behind one or more of these photographs?
Tibet is fresh on my mind. We can maybe talk about some of the Tibet photos. There's one in particular where you will see, let's see, there must be about 6 Tibetan pilgrims, and they're all in a different position doing the prostration prayer. People are surprised when I tell them that in order to make that photograph, I was walking backwards for maybe 20 minutes waiting for everyone to be in the perfect position, showing a different position of the prayer. So I have the first person in the lead in full prostration, and then there's another guy on the right side with his hands in the air, and then there's another person over here with hands here, and then there's somebody sliding into maybe on his knees. And anyway, by just being patient and allowing them to be natural, I got this picture, which I consider to be pretty amazing, in that, and I'm very proud of the fact that it's not a setup. We don't set up pictures at Geographic. We are observers, and it's got to be something real. And that's a great example of that.